Hello and welcome to the Weekend Spread, the Scooter Pod's weekly-ish college football pick'em podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me today, we've got Jameson Maxwell, Ty Lee, and the captain himself, Boaton Blake. And boys, we've moved on to the semifinals, and look, there's a lot of overwhelming arcs to talk about with college football as a whole, but I just want to go ahead and say I think the expanded playoff is excellent. The fact that we've had, I know all of the football hasn't been great, but getting moments like Cam Scatterbo versus Texas, some other. I feel like
that's really it. That is it.
It was like great moments.
Legitimately the only good game.
We've still,
but that's all it needs.
We've still had games though, and I think it's a little bloated. 8. I thought 8 was perfect before, like whenever we're at 4 and wanted to expand. Honestly, if you started from quarters on, that would be the perfect way to do it. But I can officially say I'm digging the expanded CFP.
I like it. I think it's fine. Like I don't think it is bred. I think what it generates is good storylines. It gets a lot of clicks online. It creates interesting results. So now that we get down to it, like we have a situation where we only have one SEC team, 2 Big Ten teams, and like an independent. Like I think it puts in some different people, but on a game-by-game basis, it was like it went Texas, Arizona State, and then maybe you could say Georgia, Notre Dame, just because of the walk-on kid that like was getting roasted online. You at least got some entertainment there, and then after that, I think it falls off a cliff. Like the game we were all looking forward to, the Rose Bowl, was an absolute dud. It was a spanking. It wasn't.
But that's just close. Football, though.
Yeah,
like people keep arguing about we're not getting good quality, but legitimately, football, it happens all the time. You know, we get a lot of close games in college football season-wise because there's a crap ton of teams. So more volume, you will eventually get good games like the Arizona State Texas.
And I don't think anyone would look at the way college football unfolded and be like, Oregon had no place in the playoff. They won the Big Ten, they went undefeated, they still had the best record in college football. So it's just one of those things that happened, and I think it's honestly, this sounds crazy maybe, as good for the playoff as possible that Oregon got blown out, because some of the other blowouts, it's just, you're like, oh, this could happen to everybody. And, I think for anyone playing Ohio State, especially, it can happen to everybody. But I gotta say, I found it very interesting. Not a single team with a bye won. I kind of think the seeding has to be adjusted.
Who said it? I said money line that into a parlay. Remember that? I said it. I said that's going to be a narrative.
But it's a narrative, yes, but I don't think it really says anything. Like two of the bye teams were double-digit underdogs coming into it. Like they were supposed to get blown out, and then we had 2 games that were supposed to be relatively close, one being a blowout, one was just being close by how slow it was. Like I think people are reading into this like the bye week narrative, and they're gonna make some rash decisions like it's like baseball or something, that the moment you sit out, like there's no way to get hot again. I just feel like that's not the case. Like Notre Dame would have taken the bye week if it didn't mean their like best defender or second best defender didn't get hurt for the rest of the playoff.
I feel like there's a lot of, right, I'll be the first to say I fell for this, but I feel like there's a lot of revisionist history about this Georgia team too, or maybe a lot of people just didn't watch them throughout the season and then just know, oh, they beat Texas twice and it's Georgia, they're the big dogs, pun intended, right now. Like it's, go and watch that Georgia team against Bama, go and watch that Georgia team against, Ole Miss and even some other games that they won. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't know why I expected this team to just steamroll everyone that they faced in the playoffs. That being said, though, I mean, Ohio State, Oregon, that blew me out of the water. But I think the biggest thing that we learned is not necessarily the bye weeks, but it's the fact that you can't just have the best running back in the nation who probably should have won the Heisman and, count on beating the Texas Longhorns, because it didn't work for Cam Scatterbo.
And, I mean, we got to talk about that game. Arizona State was a little robbed. The no call. They were robbed. They were absolutely robbed. The lack of, I have no idea how that wasn't a targeting. Like, what even is targeting at this point? It feels like a coin flip. It looked to me like it was just like textbook what you would see targeting, and depending on whether or not you're a targeting guy, I don't care. That just looked like targeting to me, and
Arizona State's whack kicker anyways would have missed it. So come on, just
Probably.
let him kick.
fair.
I don't get it. Like, the whole point you put the targeting rule in place is to stop the injury of players, and a guy gets slammed in the head and is laying there like unconscious, and they're like, no targeting. I'm like, the whole point is to stop people from getting injured. It's like, that should be like, if you hit somebody so hard in the head that it knocks them out, that probably should be a targeting. Like, that probably, it just,
Well,
yeah.
hell, it hurt Taft too. I'm pretty sure he was kind of banged up. So like, I don't get it.
Targeting is when the Texas boosters don't make the phone call and drop the bag to the refs, and not targeting is when they make the phone call and the refs get a new boat.
Well, Blake, and to go with what Ty just said, Blake, even though the Longhorns are out of the conference, Texas is still getting the favorable calls against the little Big 12 teams.
Yep, and same dance, just different ballroom. But it was a great, like, the good thing is, like, not to be, I feel like the SEC homers do this a lot more, but it was a good showing for the Big 12. Like, I think that game showed definitively that, like, teams were trying to write off the ACC, which was that's probably understandable. I think they've won like 2 games all full season. But then the Big 12, who has shown time and time again, they always have at least 1 or 2 teams that can really go up against the big dogs like across the country. It was a fantastic day to be a Big 12 fan. It shows once again that our conference is the most underrated conference in all of America. BYU should have gotten more consideration for the playoff than Bama, than Georgia, or than South Carolina, than Ole Miss. Yes, they should have. They should have. They look more impressive when they go up against worse teams. So I'm just tired of this. I'm so glad. Like, this is, I guess, to launch into this diatribe right now, the results of the playoffs have been fantastic for like the SEC propaganda takeover that was happening about a month ago. Like, that's been stopped in its tracks. Thank God.
It does need to be said that Blake is saying that the Big 12 is great because of a quality loss.
That's see, like, and when we try to use it, we can't use it. But then when Bama does it, they
you're saying we had a quality loss to not the best SEC team, therefore our losing record in the bowls is excusable.
And look, I think to me, like, it shows that I wouldn't say that the SEC is bad, but I don't think they're head and shoulders above some of the best teams in like the Big Ten. Like, I think you can tell that the cream of the crop of these conferences can compete on a day-to-day basis, except for the ACC. They're garbage. I think the ACC, and I'm not trying to redirect it, because you can be mad at the SEC all you want. The real opposition is the ACC, who absolutely shouldn't get favorable treatment over the Big 12 whatsoever. Like, that's ridiculous.
The ACC got so lucky. They got so lucky that they had a team right there in position where it's like, you can't set the precedent early on that it's like losses in a conference championship game when you were in that position to make the playoff, like, yeets you out. It's very frustrating. It's like, I don't get why the ACC is treated like their top 3 or 4 teams is similar, like, or on par to like the Big Ten's top 3 or 4 teams, that you can ignore the quality of the conference at the bottom just because their teams at the top are so good. It's just they have big name brands. It's like they have a Miami, they have a Clemson, that in Florida State, depending on the year, that you could push forward, but they're really showing. It's like, this is the SEC, I wouldn't say like going forward is washed per se, but it's showing that the new age college football recruiting with NIL, transfer portal, you can't just be storing guys on your 2-deep roster that are 5 stars that are going to like sit there for 3 years, come out, have a good year, and go to the draft like Alabama was doing for the longest time. That doesn't exist anymore. You got to play your freshmen, which is hard because like some of these freshmen, it's showing more and more. Like even like freshman quarterbacks this year, like DJ Lagway was probably the best, and even him, he had some moments. I love DJ Lagway, but he had some bad moments. Like Dylan Raiola really fell off a cliff. Like none of these guys are ready, but you have to play them to keep them. The SEC is just not prepared to do that, so they're going to other schools, and it's making the standard deviation between these college football programs now a lot thinner, and I love it. This is a good part of the portal.
Well, and to a weird kind of backside of it, the bad side of that too is it's not just playing time; it's also money, and the cost of keeping these in Jameson, as you know, keeping these rosters intact, it's expensive. Look at like most of OU's work, what they've done with their NIL budget has been retention, has been to keep guys from leaving because they're getting poached. And that's just kind of how it is. And it's really, I think that's hitting the big boys, like the Alabamas, the Georgias, as hard as anything. And you can tell that dominance just isn't there. You can tell that edge isn't there over the Ohio. Well, no one's over Ohio State right now. That feels like an unsustainable model where lightning struck and everything just kind of worked out for them. But I think this proliferation of elite talent, I think it's good for the sport. I think parity's good. But the SEC, I still think it's the best conference in football. I think the depth is there. But I think the depth also hurts it in a way. Because, Ole Miss probably would have given them a fight, like a little bit better.
Oh, stop
than at SMU. Probably. They probably would have. And I'm not, they didn't, but they didn't earn it. They didn't earn it. And they don't deserve to be there.
If you play these games a second time, you might not get the same blowout thing. So I feel like saying like, oh, if this team had another chance, they might have done better. Well, you get the same team that just got blown out. They might have done better if they had a second chance.
Right.
So I feel like it's just a bad argument.
No, I'm not saying like I'm saying the SEC is in its reality, and they have to operate within it. They can't play these hypotheticals over and over again. They don't deserve to be in, so they shouldn't have been in. However, they are a damn good football team. I think there are teams that are pretty damn good, but the way that the conference is settled, the way that the talent has kind of thinned out overall, it's going to be tough to get in. And you're just going to have to live with it. Ty?
It needs to be acknowledged as well that this is the first time in college football history that I can think of, certainly in the playoff era and everything else, that there has been an extreme incentive to just barely win. Right? Like some of these games were blowouts, and these teams that were blowing people out had a massive incentive to just get up and then get off the gas right away. Like there's no reason to risk playbooks and personnel and everything else. Like you have a long road ahead. Like you play some of these again and say like, oh, a lot of people seem to misremember the BCS era and think that margin of victory was the thing the entire time when it wasn't. But you play these games again and say, hey, margin of victory is getting factored in, and something about maybe a soccer scoring system where margin of victory counts in the tournament or something like that. Like these could have been a lot worse. So there's I don't think there's a scenario where these get replayed, and I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, someone deserved it or not. Right. The teams that made it there, although the ACC should be ejected into the Atlantic and just forced to only play basketball or something. But yeah, I think a lot of these games would have been a lot worse. I think a lot of these teams had, like Texas ASU, right? Even the super Texas slant is, look at how easy we, put the game away once we started focusing again. So,
yeah. But all right, let's get into the ball games, guys. So we're going to kick off with the Orange Bowl, which is a game that I personally feel like, and I think this is my case with a lot of these. I don't like a lot of the teams in the playoff remaining. I don't. There's not a lot for me to root for, and this feels like one of them. It's Notre Dame and Penn State. And look, I think this is as evenly matched as it gets. I think both of these teams have looked really good. I think that their offenses looked steady. Their defenses looked pretty ferocious on both ends. And, they both, they're not, I don't feel like they're the flashiest, but they're really good at taking advantage of mistakes. And that's what I think this game's going to come down to.
I think this is going to be a fun matchup, Bobby. I kind of disagree with that. I understand, like, we were like, oh, Penn State is gross this season because their schedule was lined up. Same thing with Notre Dame. But it doesn't matter now. It's like the semis, and I think that these are both great defenses. And I think they play good brands of college football. They've got decent quarterbacks as leaders, but not like superstars, and they've got good run games. I think like they're pretty equivocal, and I think that they're going to match up really well. And talk about games that we've had in the past. We've been talking about whining as a college football fan base of, oh, this game was a blowout. I could be completely wrong, and you guys could flame me later. I don't see this game being a blowout in many scenarios. I see this being a tough-nosed, hard-fought game that is going to come down to the fourth quarter. I don't see many ways. The way these two teams are built should provide an entertaining football game, in my opinion.
There's no way these teams can blow it out because they just seem to not score a lot either. Like they love. Yeah, it's going to be a time of possession battle, a defensive, just like who can flip the field better on punts, who has better starting field position. Because really, when I come down to it, I think Penn State's a way better team. When I see Penn State at its best, it looks incredible. When they got those two running backs going, when they got Tyler Warren doing weird gadgety things with him,
he's so good. Tyler Warren is so good.
It looks fantastic, but Kotelnicki just schemes up some of like he has good weird and then he has bad weird that just like shoots Penn State so much in the foot that it keeps teams in the game. Like they should have put Boise State away by half. Like that should have been over. They were killing them. Nick Singleton was getting about 10 yards a carry every single time they were doing it. But then you have points where I think it was like 3rd and 1, and he tries to do like a reverse pass to like get it to somebody for 1 yard when you're just gashing them. He tries to get too cute, tries to get too weird. So I think Penn State at its best, honestly, I think handles Notre Dame. I like them a little bit better. I think better called offense. I think their defenses are pretty comparable. I love what I see from Penn State, but I think Kotelnicki just kind of gets in his own way, gets into his own bag. It just keeps teams in it. And so like I do think like Jameson is correct. This one's just going to come down to the end just because it seems like Penn State will get off to either a slow starter heat up or a hot start then slow down. It just seems like they can't put the foot on the gas for 60 minutes.
And I feel like Notre Dame, like, you look at the final score and you look at how they operated kind of towards the end of the game, and you'd be like, wow, Notre Dame just dominated Georgia. That's not really the case. It was one of those games.
One offensive touchdown.
It was a game where Georgia, on all fronts, completely self-combusted. You look at what happened at the, obviously the whatever the little white cornerback running into the ref, obviously that, but more importantly the Gunnar Stockton turnover at the end of the first half was just a killer for Notre Dame, which again, that offensive touchdown right there, it's and then straight off in the second half, kick return for a touchdown for Notre Dame, and it just at that point, it's just ball game with the backups quarterback. And I'm not saying that to detract from Notre Dame by any means. Georgia's a tough team to beat, but they are really just solid at capitalizing off massive mess ups. And I don't think that Penn State has made a lot of mistakes. They aren't explosive. They at times they are with Singleton. It's going to be a lot more. This is by far the toughest team they played so far in the playoff, but I don't think they. I think they're a little bit more careful than the teams Notre Dame has played so far. Well,
I think all three of us are going Penn State +2 here.
Ty, what do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I've been so shocked by most of these playoff results, at least in this past round. ASU pleasantly surprised, devastated that they lost that, but like Oregon and Ohio State's kind of blown my mind, and just I don't know. Notre Dame, Georgia, I think looking back shouldn't have been as surprised, but there's not a good option, right? I don't like either of these teams. Hate to see that one of them is getting into the national championship, but I like Notre Dame more in this game. I don't know. I feel like I've been better off riding with Notre Dame this season. So
You've been a big time Penn State hater. I don't know if you can do it.
Penn State got gifted.
But I
gifted to
I
semifinal
rode
spot.
one of my best picks of the season that I'm most proud of is when I went on island for Notre Dame against A&M. So I'm gonna, I don't know. I like Notre Dame in this one.
I'm actually riding with Ty on this one.
I'm picking a vibe for teams.
You just
that
talked
I just
about Penn
want.
State the whole time, Bobby.
I talked about
He's doing
Notre
the
Dame
classic
the whole
tie.
time.
Just
No.
talk about one team and then reverse at the end.
I talked about how Notre Dame took advantage of Penn State, of Georgia's mess ups, but at the same time, they still kept it close. And I just have a vibe about them that they love Marcus Freeman. There's this different kind of vibe. They obviously, and I'm sure Penn State obviously loves James Franklin, but there's this just feeling about Notre Dame to me, and maybe it's the Fighting Irish propaganda getting to me, but I don't want to say Team of Destiny vibes because I think Ohio State or whoever rolls them, but I like Notre Dame in this one. I don't know, got a bit of a vibe there.
It always does scare me. It's like Penn State has gotten very lucky with the draw, an SMU team, which they're just more physical than, and then a Boise State team, where they're just significantly more talented than them. It worries me because we've seen this time and time again with Penn State. They go up against a legit opponent, they immediately lose. They go up against a bad or inferior opponent, they win. Like, James Franklin is good at that. He doesn't drop clunkers to random teams. He beats the random teams. He just can't win the big one. So I think Penn State rolls here, but I'm going to feel like an idiot if they just get blown out because that just they seem to not be able to beat legitimate teams. Like, it's just bad.
That's just football, though. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
I
won't blame.
Like, he can't get over the hump at all. Like, he can't. Like, he can. That's the great thing about this playoff. We're either going to get James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, Ryan Day, or Steve Sarkisian winning a national championship. Like, Steve Sarkisian, I think, is the least surprising of them. But Ryan Day was about to get fired a month ago, and he has a chance to go win a national championship.
It's crazy how quickly things can change, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. And speaking of how quick things can change, let's talk about that Ohio State team. A team that, like Blake said, dead in the water, vibes bad with Tennessee coming in, supposedly going to invade the shoe, and they did show up quite a bit. And here they are looking like the hottest team in college football. Well, they're heading to the Lone Star State to take on the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl. Texas, once again, in some sense of the way, gets a little, even though they have to play Ohio State, they're doing it in Dallas. That's a plus after facing the 12th and 16th ranked teams, if you just look at pure rankings. So even when Texas gets the short straw, they kind of get a good edge here with a home game. But I don't know. The Longhorns haven't been the most impressive. I think of the four teams left, they're probably the least impressive. I don't know. Jameson, what are your thoughts entering this game?
Say that again? Of the four teams left, they're the least impressive?
Of the four teams left, I think they've been the least impressive so far in the college football playoff run.
Okay, in the college football playoffs.
Like currently of the final four, like in the playoff run, they've been the least impressive.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I guess. But I mean, still the hype is like, oh, Texas could be, if it wasn't for that Ohio State-Oregon game, like they were most bettors' favorite pick to win the national championship. So I don't know. I think this should be fun. I think Ohio State showed some things these past couple games, and I think that people are turning a little bit too 180, a little bit too quickly. I think Ohio State's a very good football team, but we got to quit being so hot and cold as a fan base. We could say, hey, Ohio State's offense and their wide receivers are stellar, and when Will Howard's slinging the ball, it's working. And whenever they got the Travion Henderson running the way that he is, it's going to be hard to stop. The reality of the matter is, like, if Texas defense does what they've been doing this season, they should give Will Howard some fits. And I would expect, a little bit of more struggles within Ohio State State's offense, and that is obviously the easiest thing to say in the world from what we've seen thus far. But I think that you should see Will Howard. Can we get a Will Howard over 0.5 interceptions in this game? I might take it.
Oh, it's definitely the juice is going to be on that over 1,000%.
I don't know. Let me pull up his stats. Let's see how many games this year he's thrown an interception.
He probably hasn't because he didn't have to play many legit teams. Like we
Yeah.
saw what
Well,
happened
let's-
against Michigan. We
Let's
saw
pull up
like
the legit ones then. So versus Oregon, he didn't. Tennessee, he threw an interception. Versus Michigan, he threw 2. Versus Indiana, he threw 1. So, yeah, you're right. The juice will be on that side.
Keep in mind, Texas is pretty familiar with Howard, too, when he was at K-State. So there's, a little bit of familiarity.
Oh, that would really get the college football sphere, really upset. Texas is very familiar with their time with Will Howard and K-State.
Yeah. Hey, Blake, do you remember the last time Will Howard played at AT&T Stadium? Do you happen to remember that game?
Oh, my
was?
God.
Oh,
I think I remember that game.
Blake, I remember that game. That was a fun one.
I thought you were gonna say last time we played Texas, and I was like, they got very robbed in the end, but had to bring up those bad memories. But yeah, like this line makes no sense to me. Like Jameson kind of pointed to it. It's like obviously Ohio State's the hot team; they have the hot hand, but Texas was the favorite going into like this last weekend of winning the national championship. And now they are like a touchdown underdog in a place that's very close to them. Like I understand Ohio State is rolling right now, and they've kind of gotten out of their own way. They didn't do. I've been pointing to it all along. It's like the Michigan loss shouldn't have been so alarming for Ohio State just because they were trying to beat Michigan in a certain way, which their team is just not suited to do. You gotta like roll out those real stud wide receivers, throw the ball, and then that can help the running game. It's when you're scared of everything, it's hard to stop something. But when you're going up against Michigan and just trying to run it down their throats, trying to prove that you're somehow more physical than them, that you could beat them the way they've been beating you, like that's what put them in this hole. But when Texas is good, Texas looks awesome. Like that offense with Quinn Ewers looks more like a Bo Nix and just getting guys the ball, letting them do their thing. It looks fantastic, but I don't know if I could trust Quinn Ewers. I don't.
He does not have that.
When is the last time he did that for a full ball game?
No.
See, that's the thing. It's not a full. It's not like a ball game to ball game thing. It feels like it's like a percentage of a game at a time. Like he was great in overtime versus Arizona State, but he disappeared entirely for like a quarter and a half of football. That caused them to get back in.
And I feel like that's kind of been the story of Texas this year. And I know I'm obviously a bit of a hater, and I've been on the warpath against the Longhorns this year, but they haven't played complete games. They have let teams who are significantly inferior than them hang around like way more times than I feel comfortable with, and it almost got them eliminated last week out. They should have stomped Arizona State. They should have kept rolling. They were killing them. That should have not been a football game, but they did what they do all season long and let off the gas and damn near got scatty-bowed. And, shoot, they were literally 1/4 and 11 away from getting bounced out of this thing. You
got to give Quinn Ewers props for that play, though. That
absolutely,
was
you do.
Pre-snap read. Like, that was all pre-snap.
No doubt. You got to give him credit for that.
Blitz on 4th down is a wild move on a 4th and long. I know Dillingham owned up to it and said like that was all on him. Like he was the one that called that, but just insanity.
Especially against that Texas O-line. Like
here's the thing though that I'm thinking about this one, right? You can say, oh, Texas was one play away of not being in this game because of a play against the Big 12 champion, got a bye week, Arizona State in the playoffs. Ohio State was one play away against Nebraska from not being in the playoffs. Like this, when I look at this schedule analysis, but when I think back to watching these teams outside of Georgia, and then, the Clemson score is not that impressive, but Texas backed off. Outside of the 2 times they played Georgia, some sort of kryptonite there, and then ASU, Texas has looked impressive and in control of every single game that they've been in, and they look like they know their identity. Blake and I are kind of in step here together on this Ohio State team. Is they've had games this year where they just haven't looked all that great, right? And I'll exclude Penn State because Penn State's now, in the playoffs, and they won that game. And the first Oregon game was a slugfest. We all thought that would be the national championship game right there. Some people thought that at the time. But this Ohio State team just randomly, way too late in the season, like Michigan, for example, just completely forgets their identity and what works for them and tries to do something random that doesn't make any sense. And that certainly worries me when you're talking about a team like Texas, who their biggest thing is letting off the gas. And then Quinn Ewers, who is Quinn Ewers like a deep cover Ohio State sleeper agent, and this is his moment that he's been waiting for to be activated and throw the game for Ohio State and then collect his Ohio State bag. That is yet to be seen. The Browns do need a quarterback, so this could be a deep cover Quinn Ewers Ohio play.
Well, you forget, Ty, he started at Ohio State.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be a sleeper agent. This is his moment. He's going to get a $10 million NIL bag from Ohio State for throwing this game, and then he's going to get a $100 million a year guaranteed from the Browns.
He's not going to get drafted by the Browns. Let's just stop that right now. I'm getting way ahead.
It's a little high.
Second
round, maybe?
I'm calling my shot right now. Quinn Ewers is going to be in Ohio State next year. He's going to be at Ohio State.
It could be Oregon, Ohio State, Ole Miss. Like, it's going to be somewhere, and it's going to be a large amount.
Ole Miss, Quinn Ewers would be insane. But
man, he's gonna. You'd have to bring back the mullet.
You know what? He probably would go out of conference, though. I think that he'd leave the SEC.
Maybe. I think he's a straight mercenary for the bag, but. USC Quinn Ewers, but
that's bad. Don't do that, Quinn.
Look, I'll say my personal bias is if I don't want any of these four teams to win, but if I had to pick one, it'd be Ohio State. But I think that Texas to me is the clear favorite. I'm trying, maybe I'm overcorrecting from the Oregon game because I was so in shock for that, and I'm trying not to buy this Ohio State hype, but I just don't. Ohio State has had these random moments. And then we're still talking about Ryan Day, who it's very suspicious to me that like OU fans are not cheering for Texas en masse in this in this game or in the playoffs. Like Penn State, I don't know if anyone actually considers Penn State their rivals, but whoever Penn State is they think they're rivals with everyone, but whoever their rivals.
The Big Ten doesn't even think they have rivals. So
yeah. I forgot the other team that's in the playoff. Notre Dame also, do they have rivals? USC, I guess. Shout out Ford. But like Michigan fans are rooting for Ohio State en masse to win the national championship so that they can just guarantee more Ryan Day contracts and more wins in the game.
Oh my God.
It's like Portnoy tweets about it like every day, like overtly cheering for Ohio State because they just have his number. And to me, Texas with Georgia knocked out, if they can clear, like this is, I'll say this with the utmost disrespect to Notre Dame and Penn State, this is the national championship game, right? That could age poorly if one of these teams makes it and gets blown out. But I think these are the best.
I think there are three like really, really good teams, and I think there's one team that's clearly better, and I think it's Ohio State. I know recency bias, but it feels like two different teams, what we've seen the previous 2 weeks. And I would much rather take what we've seen, a locked-in Ohio State, over whatever the hell we saw in the regular season, which was hot and cold here and there. It's almost like two different football teams. And to me, I feel like they're as complete as it gets on offense, defensively incredible. When they're locked in and physical on, when Sawyer's going after guys, that 180 we saw in that Rose Bowl, it had me convinced. I was very impressed by Tennessee. Wanted to see them have a repeat performance and look really good against an Oregon team that I thought was as complete as it gets. And beyond past that test for me. And I just think, to me, like, that is a really good football team. I don't see anybody stopping them. And look, Their social media people clearly don't know what Arlington, Texas looks like. But
I was about to say that, Bobby. Why are we putting it happens every year. Why are we putting a cactus in the promo photos when Arlington, Texas is probably the most boring place in like the entire earth to look at, like aesthetically? Why
What are they going to put a Walmart? Just put a bunch of strip malls.
A nondescript large warehouse terminal.
God, I wish Arlington could just fall into a black hole and we could just bring Fort Worth and Dallas way closer together and could build stadiums that are close to one of the respective cities and not just be in this middle land wasteland of a city. I hate Arlington so much.
Are Ohio State fans like complaining a ton about where this game is being played? Because that is a massive, like that's
Of course
pretty
they are.
awesome.
It's
Ohio
the same
State
thing
fans complain
Oklahoma
about it.
fans have dealt with for years. You know, it seems to always fate ends up where LSU ends in the Sugar Bowl, USC ends up in the Rose Bowl, and now
Georgia
Texas is
always,
gonna have it.
like
Georgia
always
ends in the beach.
Atlanta. Georgia is always in Atlanta for some reason.
Georgia did get screwed this year by not getting the Peach Bowl because they were
Well, then
forced
they
to go.
should.
They're forced to go to the Sugar Bowl because of bowl ties. Because the Sugar Bowl's like, well, we automatically get the SEC champion. So, yeah,
That's true.
it's silly. This thing needs a little bit of refining. But anyways,
Texas +6. That's my pick.
I'm taking Texas +6.
I don't see it.
It's just
Ohio State.
It's a numbers play. It's just a classic like Vegas numbers play that it's like if this game was a week ago, for some reason the line would be probably like 1 or 2, and it's like one data point shouldn't skew it so much that they're now a touchdown favorite.
I also want to say we haven't seen Texas play from behind outside of that Georgia game, which they looked awful.
Yeah.
They've been
knows if
behind.
they
We
will
haven't
be
really
behind.
seen, we haven't really seen Ohio,
can-
or
you
we
can
saw Ohio
technically
State
tell-
play from behind, and they played horrendously. Like
if you count ASU overtime, Texas looks insane.
But even they traded blows with they traded blows with Oregon that first meeting, so they don't. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad take. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know how. If Texas can't get out to a hot start, which is kind of their thing, it's a hot start, coast out. I don't see how it's going to work for them. But I've talked enough about the Buckeyes and Longhorns here. Ty, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean I think the only note I didn't say on Ohio State is the one thing that does worry me about valuing the Oregon game too much is that was a repeat game that was also Ohio State's wake up call. And you kind of have to assume that was the game that all season they took notes from that and said, let's improve all this stuff that we think lost us this game. And what we saw was just kind of a validation exercise for them last week, showing how complete they are. But again, against a team that they already had tape on, they maybe kind of lost to as a fluke anyways. And so that does worry me a little bit. They have obviously looked very, very impressive. But yeah, I'm still riding with Texas in this one.
Jeremiah Smith should be allowed to go to the draft this year. He's the best.
What
player
number?
left in
What
the
number do
playoffs.
you think he'd go if he was in this draft? 2,
Probably top 10.
3?
Yeah.
Maybe
He's a
3.
It's insane that we went from Marvin Harrison Jr., who we thought was by far the best wide receiver we've seen at Ohio State, and this guy's already eclipsed him in his freshman year. Like he's nuts. He is nuts.
I guess he wouldn't go 3. New York wouldn't pick a wide receiver, but still, like it's kind of wild that he's going to be, unless something happens with DJ Lagway and he becomes the amazing. I don't see him losing that first pick in the draft unless the team that is there is like unbelievably desperate for a quarterback.
But that's what usually happens. It's like bad NFL teams are usually very desperate for a quarterback.
But it's like, the Patriots, if they didn't botch it, they would have been the number 1 pick this year. So, and they could have picked like a wide receiver. So.
Yeah. And it is truly wild how many great freshman wide receivers we've had, this year in college football. Ryan Williams at Alabama. Yeah. So just, impressive stuff.
Zion Reagan's at Oklahoma. You're right. Keep on saying.
Hey, Ivan, carry on. All right, that's our show here for the weekend spread. Thank y'all so much for listening to us preview the semifinals. We'll be back to talk about the national championship at some point. But until then, thank y'all all so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Good luck out there, everybody.